right, let's dive into Who Moved My Cheese. So it's a book I've seen mentioned everywhere, and you know what I'm talking about, right? That whole idea of dealing with change. You sent this one in, and so I'm guessing you're pretty curious about how to handle all the twists and turns life throws at you. Just like those characters in this story. A parable about cheese. And luckily, I've got our expert here who's amazing at unpacking even the simplest stories and finding the gold nuggets of wisdom within.
Who Moved My Cheese? It's a classic for a reason. You know it's a quick read, but it really packs a punch when it comes to understanding our struggles with change.
So we had these four characters running around this maze. Sniff, Scurry, Hem, and Haw. Two are mice, and two are these little people, and they're all after the same thing, cheese. But what I find interesting is how they're not just cute names, right? Each one represents a different way people react to change.
Exactly. It's amazing how Spencer Johnson, the author, uses these characters to tap into those psychological patterns we all have. Think about it, when we're faced with a challenge, some people like Sniff and Scurry are ready to adapt like that. Boom! They're quick. They smell change coming and they scurry off to find new solutions. But then you have others like Hem and Haw. They get stuck, clinging to the old ways, even when things aren't working anymore.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's break down this whole cheese and maze thing, because that's kind of the whole point of the book, right? The cheese is a metaphor for anything we desire, right? It could be success or love, maybe even just feeling secure. And the maze, I guess that's that constantly changing world we're trying to figure out.
Exactly. And it's such a powerful metaphor. It makes the story relatable. I mean, we all have our own cheese we're after. We're all trying to find our way in this maze of life.
So what's the deal with Cheese Station C? Why does all the drama seem to start there?
Well, at first, all four characters are living the good life. They're at Cheese Station C, and they found their favorite cheese, they've got routines, and everyone's feeling pretty content. But it's this sense of security that sets them up for their very different reactions to change.
Ah, so they get comfortable. I mean, maybe a little too comfortable, like it's going to last forever.
Right. It's like that concept you hear in psychology, the hedonic treadmill. We adapt to good things so quickly, and then we just take them for granted. So even when we achieve something we've been going after, that happiness fades, and we're back to wanting more, always looking for the next hit.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But it makes total sense. So what happens when, inevitably the cheese disappears from Cheese Station C?
Here's where we see those different personality types collide with change. Sniff and Scurry, true to their names, accept the situation, and they just run off to find new cheese. They don't get stuck complaining or dwelling on what they've lost. They are all about action.
They're like hardwired for resilience. Like they don't even stop to question things.
Exactly. I think there's a huge lesson there. Sometimes the best way to handle change is to accept it. Don't dwell on the past or try to resist what's happening, because it just prolongs things, the discomfort.
Hem and Haw, on the other hand, take this whole cheese disappearance thing pretty hard, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. They're like the poster children for resisting change, especially when it feels like loss. Their first reaction is denial, and then anger and a whole lot of blame. They get fixated on who moved my cheese instead of what can I do to find new cheese.
It's interesting. It reminds me of the endowment effect. It's where we overvalue what we own or what we're used to, simply because it's ours. So it's not just that they're losing cheese. It's almost like something's been taken from them. And that makes it even more painful.
That's such a good point, and it really fuels their negative reaction, and that's where their lack of adaptability really hurts them.
So Sniff and Scurry are off exploring new options, and Hem and Haw are stuck in a cheeseless rut.
Yeah, unfortunately. They spend days, even weeks, just hanging around empty Cheese Station C, hoping that things will magically go back to how they were. They analyze everything to death and debate who's to blame, and pretty much resist anything that looks like moving forward.
They're trapped in this cycle of just doing nothing. Like the fear of the unknown is paralyzing them.
And you know what? This highlights another psychological thing: loss aversion. Research has shown that we feel the pain of loss much more strongly than the pleasure of an equal gain. So that helps to explain why Hem and Haw cling so tightly to what they had, even though it's gone. They're terrified to go out into the maze and face possibly even more loss.
They've built their own mental maze.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of hope, right? Haw starts to think maybe they're doing this all wrong.
Yes. Haw is the one who finally starts to see the light. He realizes that being stubborn isn't helping. I mean, he's still scared, but he's slowly accepting that change might lead to something better, even if it's scary.
He's the one who takes that first step, right out into the maze, leaving the comfort, well, really the discomfort of what he knows. That must have taken so much courage. to face all that uncertainty.
It did. And that's where his real journey begins. As he ventures out, he starts leaving these little messages on the walls, like breadcrumbs of wisdom as he goes through the maze, and, to remind him that there's a chance of finding new cheese.
I love that. Those messages are like pep talks for him, helping him stay focused when things get tough. What kind of things does he write?
One that really stands out to me is, if you do not change, you can become extinct. It's a powerful reminder that in a world that's constantly changing, you can't just stand still. You have to adapt or you get left behind.
That's a powerful one. That applies to everything from businesses trying to keep up with new technology to people learning new skills for their careers. But now he's got all this new wisdom. Does he just breeze through the maze?
Not really. He definitely stumbles, gets lost, doubts himself. It's not easy at all. But he keeps reminding himself that moving forward, even when it's scary, is way better than staying stuck.
He really embodies that growth mindset you hear so much about. Setbacks are just opportunities to learn and adjust.
Right. He's becoming more resilient with each step. And he starts to realize that the journey itself is a reward, exploring new things.
It's about the transformation, not the destination.
Exactly. He's becoming more adaptable and courageous, ultimately a more fulfilled version of himself. And that's a lesson that goes way beyond this little book.
Okay, I need to know. Does he find new cheese? And what about him? Does he ever escape his cheeseless world?
Well, we're going to dive into those questions in just a bit. But first, I want to hear from you. What's resonating with you so far?
Yeah, what kind of cheese are you chasing? And which character do you identify with most? We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into Who Moved My Cheese.
We're back. So Ha is out there in the maze. He's really embracing the unknown, writing those little inspirational quotes on the walls. It's a great visual. But the story doesn't end there, does it? There's that whole gathering at the end, and I'm curious what happens. How do the former classmates connect their own lives to the story?
That gathering is really interesting because it takes us beyond just the simple story and shows how these cheese-seeking ideas play out in the real world. It's like the story is holding up a mirror to our own experiences with change.
Yeah, it's cool to see how the story hits people differently, depending on, their personality or what they've been through. Some find it validating and others, find a whole new way of looking at things.
Yeah, and what I found fascinating is that it goes deeper than just retelling the story. It explores how we act as humans, and how we often get in our own way when things change. Right, like Carlos, who saw himself in him. Resistant, afraid to move on from the past. But then, hearing the story and hearing what others went through helped him see the value in adapting. And that's actually what led him to success in his business.
I think Carlos's story shows how powerful it can be to share experiences. Sometimes we need to hear other people's stories to see ourselves,
Right.
recognize our own patterns, and then we can see that things can be different.
It's like that light bulb moment. Oh, wait, I've been doing the him thing.
Right. I think that's the beauty of the story. It lets us admit to those tendencies without feeling judged. I mean, we all have times where we dig in our heels and resist change, even when it's obvious we need to move on.
For sure. Like we get so attached to what we know
Yeah.
that we forget to look around for anything new. But the gathering shows that even though everyone reacts to change differently, they can still work together. Remember Michael's story about how he used the Who Moved My Cheese ideas in his company when they went through a big change?
That's a great example of how understanding those different reactions can be so helpful. Michael realized that his company had all the types: sniffs, scurries, hems, and haws. And by figuring out their strengths and building a system that used all those differences, he was able to make the transition smoothly.
It's like putting together an orchestra. Each instrument has its own part to play to create this amazing sound. But the book seems to really emphasize that each person is responsible for finding their own new cheese. What about leadership? Don't they have a part in helping people through change?
That is a great question, and the gathering actually addresses that too. It emphasizes that even though people need to take charge of their own journey, leaders have to set the tone, build a culture that embraces change and offer support all along the way.
So it's not just about telling people, hey, just go with the flow. It's more about making people feel safe to explore and experiment and even fail sometimes.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where people feel safe taking risks, where they're not afraid to try new things because they might get in trouble.
Makes sense. If you're scared of making a mistake, you're less likely to do anything. But what about those people who are like super stuck in their hemness? The ones who just won't admit that things have changed?
Well, the story acknowledges that some people may just hold on to their old cheese no matter what. Even after Haw finds his new cheese, he keeps thinking about him. He thinks about going back to try and convince him to leave.
I know. I always feel that. Like you want to help the people you care about, to save them from being stuck.
But in the end, Haw realizes he can't make him change. Hem has to decide that for himself.
It's hard but true. We can't control what other people do, even when we think we know what's best.
Right. And I think the story reminds us that sometimes the best way to help people is to focus on our own growth. The more we embrace change and show the good that can come from it, the more likely others are to see that and maybe even follow us. Remember those messages Haw leaves on the maze walls?
Yeah. It's like he's saying, hey, I found something really cool over here. Come join me if you're ready.
Exactly. It's compassion. It's leading by example. It's trusting that people will find their way when they're ready.
So it's more than just moving with the cheese. It's about doing it gracefully, with empathy, and letting others find their own path. I'm still wondering, though, does Haw ever see Hem again? And what kind of new cheese did he end up finding?
Well, we'll get to that in the last part of our deep dive. We'll talk about what Haw discovers and the message of hope in this story. We'll be right back.
We're back. We've talked about all the characters and, that whole cheese and maze thing. But how does this apply to the listener?
That's the big question, right? Who Moved My Cheese is more than just a story. It's a way to think about change. It's like a reminder that change is going to happen. It's the one thing you can always count on. And how well we deal with it, that's what determines our success, our happiness even.
So it's not about stopping the cheese from moving. It's more like being ready to move when it does, or even better, ahead of it. But that's got to be tough, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's about being more like Sniff and Scurry, alert, ready for anything, anticipating changes before they turn into big problems. But let's be honest, not all of us are like that. Some of us are a little more, how do I say this? A little more hem and hawish.
Guilty as charged. Sometimes I cling to the familiar, even when it's not working anymore. So what advice do you have for those of us who, struggle with change?
First, be kind to yourself. It's okay to feel a little scared or unsure when you're dealing with something new. Even Haw had his moments. We're all human.
Give ourselves permission to be human. Because change is messy. It can be really uncomfortable, and it's okay to feel that.
Absolutely. One thing that helps is visualization. Remember how Haw pictured himself enjoying that new cheese? That's more than just a daydream. It can actually help you.
So you're saying we should try to create a picture in our mind of what success looks like, how amazing it will feel when we achieve a goal, or find that new cheese. It's like a movie trailer for your own life.
Yes. The more real you make that picture, the more you can feel it, the more it will motivate you to actually make it happen.
But what about those times when it feels like the cheese has moved a million times? It's like you're exhausted from all the changes.
That's when it's important to remember what Haw learned. Smell the cheese often so you know when it is getting old. Basically, don't get caught sleeping. Be aware of little changes happening around you so you're not blindsided.
It's like a regular checkup. Is it still good? Is it still making me happy? Or is there something better out there?
Yeah. And if you notice things aren't so great anymore, it's time to start exploring before you're left with nothing. Be proactive, not reactive.
So it's not just about blindly going wherever the cheese takes you. It's about making sure you're going after something you actually want.
Exactly. And that's where choice comes in. Who Moved My Cheese reminds us that we always have a choice. We can complain and blame others. Or we can be adventurous, Explore and learn and grow and discover new things along the way. Maybe even better cheese.
It's not about the cheese, really. It's about who you become along the way.
That's exactly it. And that's my hope for you. No matter what your cheese is, no matter how many times it moves, you have the power to decide how you'll respond. You can create a life that's both fulfilling and, cheesy in a good way.
Well said. That's some seriously good advice. So, listener, think about your life this week. Where are you hemming and hawing? What's one little step you can take even today to start moving towards your own new cheese? Remember, even Sniff and Scurry took things one step at a time.
That's right. It's about progress, not perfection.
We want to hear about your cheese journey. Share your thoughts with us on social media using #NewCheeseJourney. Join us next time for another deep dive into the world of ideas. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep chasing that new cheese.